Yeah, so it's been a little while since I've done a first Saturday seminar. I'm excited to do it again. And I've tried to pack about 4 seminars into this seminar. So early on, I'm going to say that if I go, beyond your capacity to listen to me keep going, feel free to just quietly leave. I know there's some other events going on this morning. It will not bother me at all. I'm going to try to go kind of fast and get through this, and hopefully we'll do it all, but it will not bother me one bit if you just kind of scoot out if you need to go. Yeah, so what's up with our river? A little advocacy update. We're halfway through the year. I thought this might be a good time to just kind of touch base on a few of these issues. I'll get that for you. Okay. And most of these have an opportunity for you, Cape Fear River Watch members, community members, to get involved and have a little input on these issues. And that input is not a little input, actually. It's actually really critically important input. When decision makers hear from you, that's when they shift their position. That's when they learn new things. That's when they start to understand that community voices matter. And we've seen that move the needle in big ways and things. So keep that in mind. You got to plug this thing in. There we go. Door. I'll get the door. Okay. So I'm going to go over this mission statement. I try to do this every talk because there's a lot packed in there. To protect and improve. So we're trying to prevent new bad things from happening. That's getting to be a tougher and tougher job these days. Protect and improve. We're trying to restore bad things that happened in the past. So we try to do both of those. It's a past, present, and future kind of outlook. Water quality, that's where we focus. Cape Fear River Basin, we've got plenty to do in the Cape Fear River Basin, so we try to focus our efforts there. For all people, we don't protect water. For some people, every single human being deserves access to clean, safe, healthy water. Every single human being deserves the right to access that water for all of the benefits that clean water provides to people. And we do it through education, advocacy, and action. I'm going to focus mostly on advocacy today. Many of you probably know Rob and all of the water quality programs he leads, all of the cleanups, all of the citizen science, all of the monitoring of waterways. He does an incredible job, and I could spend an entire presentation, probably multiple presentations, talking about the incredible action work that he does, and he does that all because you guys get involved and help. But today, we'll get Rob in here to do a presentation soon, but today I'm going to talk about advocacy. Remember the Waterkeeper Alliance, shorter, maybe more concise mission statement there to protect our right to clean water in communities around the world. There are waterkeepers on 6 continents, all over the world. We are just a member of that big global network. So, you're Cape Fear River Watch folks, you probably know. This is the Cape Fear River Basin. This is an enlarged Cape Fear River Basin. I'm going to be talking about these areas today. This is Asheboro. Asheboro is on the Deep River. Deep and the Haw Rivers come together at Mermaid Point. That's where the official Cape Fear River starts. Sanford, Fuquay-Varina, that's the other place we're going to talk about. This is going to be around 1,4-dioxane. This is going to be about interbasin transfers. Cumberland County right here at the Big Bend in the Cape Fear River near the Bladen County line. This is Chemours. Sampson County, headwaters of the Black River. Duplin County, headwaters of the Northeast Cape Fear River. Castle Hayne. We'll talk a little bit about some stuff going on in Castle Hayne, and then the estuary down here. So those are where we're going to be today, just kind of getting you set. Remember, the Cape Fear River is a big, important river in North Carolina. The largest watershed in North Carolina, 9,000 square miles, larger than the state of New Jersey. The Deep and the Haw come together to form the Cape Fear. The Black comes in, the Northeast Cape Fear comes in. We've got this big 30-mile long estuary. Only river in North Carolina that empties directly into the Atlantic Ocean. Very important historically, very important ecologically. 1 in 5 North Carolinians gets their drinking water from the Cape Fear Basin. That's a really big deal. And there are a ton of miles of tributaries where human beings and the environment interact. 6,500 miles of places where our everyday actions impact water quality in the Cape Fear River Basin. But this is what everybody thinks of, right? So, and there's a lot in this picture actually. This is our drinking water treatment plant right here. Our drinking water comes in a pipe under the river, crosses about right here. There it is actually. Comes in from Lock and Dam 1 upstream. We get our water above Lock and Dam number 1, so salt water doesn't impact the pipes and the works of drinking water treatment because salt water is very corrosive. We've got Eagles Island here, the battleship, we've got the port down here, the Riverwalk we all love so much. Point Peter right here, this is where the main stem of the Cape Fear River comes in and meets the northeast Cape Fear River. I talked about this starting up in Duplin County. If you go up here, you go all the way through Bladen, Cumberland, and about 13 miles upstream is where the Black comes in. So you've got these three rivers all coming together really close to Wilmington. And they're draining this, really big part of North Carolina. And, this is what some of those rivers look like, upstream, like, around above Fayetteville, Lillington area. You've got these fast-moving rocky rivers. This is where fish like striped bass like to swim up to spawn. Areas like this, you've got these slow, meandering blackwater streams. You've got this big estuary in the middle, fresh and saltwater mixing, super important area for nursery habitat for fish and birds and things like that. And then, down towards the mouth, you have this very marine environment. This is behind Bald Head Island. That's the mouth of the Cape Fear River right there. All the species you associate with marine environments, porpoise and blue crabs and oysters and tarpon and, all kinds of amazing birds. But all of this together, this incredible geographic diversity makes up the Cape Fear Basin, and that leads to this incredible biologic diversity. And that's one of the reasons why we fight so hard for this area, because from all the way up here on the eastern seaboard of Maine all the way down to Florida, this area right here in the lower Cape Fear has the highest degree of biodiversity of anywhere on the eastern seaboard of the United States. Really important. Really good reason to fight so hard protecting it, right? That's my favorite place in the basin. I don't, they say like with your kids, you don't want to pick favorites, but this is kind of my favorite. This is the Three Sisters Swamp on the Black River, oldest cypress trees on planet Earth. And just a really incredible spot, 3,000-year-old trees. Beautiful blackwater swamp. That's all right, come on in. And there's a lot of really incredible spots in the Cape Fear Basin. This photo was taken by Alan Craddock. He's a board member of ours. I don't think he's here this morning, but I fly a lot so that I can see things that you can't see from the road. And when I'm fortunate enough to get Alan up in the plane with me, he takes these amazing photos of the Cape Fear Basin. There's the estuary. But, the Cape Fear, although it's big and it's amazing and it's geographically, biologically diverse, it's the drinking water supply for 1 in 5 North Carolinians. It's also the most industrialized watershed in North Carolina. It's the watershed where we have, the most NPDES permits that discharge into this waterway. It's the watershed that has more animal agriculture operations than any other watershed in North Carolina. And so, this is where, we see conflict between our desire to have clean water and healthy water and beautiful waterways, and the desire of industry to make money and to have a place to pull water for their use. This is kind of an old photo, but I like it. This is gone now. Yeah. Well, the plant's still here, but this coal part of it is this is where they used to burn coal to create electricity. Now this is a natural gas plant right here. But these are coal ash ponds. They're gone now. Instead, there's an above-ground lined and capped landfill with a leachate collection system. But this just really shows, how close industry is and how kind of tied to the river industry is. This is the Cape Fear River that you kind of see winding down here. This is Sutton Lake. This is, around here, this is a fishing pier and boat launch for Sutton Lake. This is a public fishing lake. And these were coal ash ponds that were situated adjacent to the fishing pier. Hog farms. This is not an experiment in like dying retention ponds or something. This is animal waste. 3 huge lagoons. These are probably full-size F-150s over here. Giant pools of, feces and urine from hogs. I took this picture from the boat, but this is another aspect that we're going to talk about today of the Cape Fear River and its uses. So I'm going to try to go through a lot of stuff, and I'm going to, assume that this crowd in particular has kind of a base level of understanding, and so I'll go through some of this stuff kind of fast. Maybe we'll save questions for the end, unless it's just a really burning question, and then we'll make an exception. But you guys know the PFAS story probably, right? These are really persistent compounds, frequently called forever chemicals. They bioaccumulate in our body. There's minimal regulation. They're everywhere, and they're especially prevalent in the Cape Fear Basin. So they get here through direct manufacturing like Chemours. They get here through secondary users like Lear. They get here through landfills like the Sampson County landfill, where waste from these industries goes, and also where waste containing those everyday products that we use that have PFAS in them go, like carpet and stain-resistant fabrics and things like that. They get there through air deposition. So when these plants, emit PFAS into the air, it settles on the ground. Those molecules are forever molecules. They just percolate down into the aquifer, and then they're in our drinking water wells. They get here through agriculture. A lot of pesticides have PFAS in them, and those pesticides, allow that PFAS to run off into agriculture runoff. It gets into rivers. It gets into fish. It's a big story. We learn, more about it every day, but we know quite enough about it now to know that PFAS are dangerous, and that we need to be doing much, much more to regulate them, and much, much more to stop creating new PFAS. How does it get into our body? Through the water we drink. That's our #1 route of exposure here in the Cape Fear Basin. We drank this water for about 40 years, contaminated with high levels of PFAS. Eating fish that you catch in water that's contaminated with PFAS. Swallowing household dust and things like that. So, if you've got a bunch of stain-resistant carpet, that creates dust. That dust has PFAS in it. Food grown around PFAS, either, crops grown that take up PFAS from the soil, animals that eat, hay and things like that have PFAS in them, and then you milk those animals, and that, has PFAS in it. Food packaging, pizza boxes and biscuit wrappers and all that kind of stuff. And then consumer products like, Scotchgard and Gore-Tex and Teflon and those kinds of things. And then I added this one down here. This is an important one, especially for firefighters, is that there's a lot of exposure for firefighters through, fighting the fires, what's burning, what they're inhaling, their turnout gear that's coated with PFAS in many cases, and AFFF, aqueous film forming foam, the foam that you spray on really hot, hard to manage fires, like at airports and ships and things like that. So, like I said, we're ground zero. In many ways, we had this huge plant that contaminated the Cape Fear for so long. We sued Chemours. That lawsuit resulted in a consent order that required the company to spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're continuing to spend millions of dollars cleaning up that site, reducing air emissions by 99%, stopping the discharge of PFAS into the river. It requires well testing, an ever-expanding network of well testing. Out of all this, an exposure study was started through the Center for Human Health and the Environment at NC State. Jane Hoppin leads that study. They've done blood testing for residents here In Fayetteville and in Pittsburgh, we know that we have higher levels than most other people in the country. A fish consumption advisory grew out of this. The Department of Health and Human Services issued a fish consumption advisory for the part of the Cape Fear around Comores all the way down to the mouth of the Black River that said, people should avoid eating fish for the most part. Comores isn't the only source. There are upstream sources, right? There's pretreatment failures at wastewater treatment plants that are designed to treat human waste, which is a pretty simple thing to treat, but they take industrial waste from people that create PFAS and they don't do a good job of pretreating it, so it just goes right through the system, either through the water that is discharged into the river through that system, or from the biosolids. So what's left over after a traditional wastewater treatment plant treats waste is water that's been cleaned to a pretty high degree, and it's got a permit that includes those, what they can discharge as far as like dissolved oxygen and nutrients and bacteria and things like that. And then you're left with this sludge, and that sludge gets spread frequently on the ground and then runs off into waterways. And so if that sludge has PFAS in it, which it would if it took industrial waste, then the runoff from that sludge has PFAS in it and it goes into our waterways. We've sampled those sites and they have high levels. And then other sources throughout the basin, both within the Cape Fear, the main stem of the Cape Fear, and other parts of the Cape Fear Basin like the Northeast and the Black, you've got landfills. The largest, dirtiest landfill in the state of North Carolina is in Sampson County. It's a huge landfill. It takes trash it takes waste from 73 North Carolina counties that all go to one county. Other states and even other countries send the worst of their worst to the Sampson County landfill. And wells near that landfill are contaminated with PFAS that came from Comores years ago when that landfill had large sections that were unlined. It's an incredibly, filthy landfill, and it has really destroyed lives nearby it. Secondary PFAS users, like there's a company called Lear Corporation. I'll talk about it in a minute. They make automotive seats that are coated with PFAS so that they don't, get stains in them. They're on the Northeast Cape Fear. They discharge into the Northeast Cape Fear. Airports, military bases, agriculture. I talked about pesticide use and how much PFAS is in pesticides. And then dredge sediment, I put a question mark in there because sometimes people are like, well, what are you talking about? But if you've got a river that's had PFAS dumped into it for 40 or 50 years, you can expect the sediment in that river to have PFAS in it. And if you take that sediment and then you dredge it all up and you pump it into other places like onto beaches or onto bird islands or onto marshes, you can expect that that sediment is going to bring that PFAS with it and reintroduce it into contact with folks. We'll talk about that. And then kind of new on the scene for PFAS are these ultra short chain. The ability for scientists to measure PFAS, the ability of for scientists to understand PFAS has grown exponentially in the last 10 years since we've kind of learned about PFAS. We couldn't even measure things that we can pretty easily measure today. And these ultra short chain PFAS, so PFOA and PFAS is legacy PFAS, that molecule that was in the first slide, that's 8 carbons long with a bunch of fluorine attached to it and some sulfur. These ultra short chain are like 1 carbon with a fluorine, maybe 2 fluorines, maybe 1 extra sulfur, a hydrogen and oxygen or something like that. And just kind of, if you just intuitively you think, well, the smaller the thing is, the easier the thing fits through a filter that's designed to filter out bigger things, right? So a filter that's designed to filter out a 6 or an 8 chain PFAS is going to have a harder time filtering out a 1 or a 2 carbon chain. And so that's what we're seeing today, is that filters are having a harder time stopping these ultra short chains, but we know that Comores is right now discharging these ultra short chains. And so that's a new issue. They've got a permit up for renewal soon. I'm going to talk quickly about the fish consumption advisory because it's something that I think is maybe a little bit off the radar. So I'm going to go through this fast if you got questions. But sensitive populations, women of childbearing age, pregnant women, and nursing mothers and children. So these are people where, pollutants are going to have a big impact on development. They should not eat these species of fish in the Cape Fear River from Fayetteville down to the Black River. And these 2 species in particular I highlight, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but they're very common for folks to eat. Catfish are too. And then for males 18 years or older, no more than one meal a year. I mean, personally, I think that basically means just don't eat these fish, right? Like, if they're like, you should only have 6 ounces of this fish in an entire year, that's probably a pretty good sign. You might just steer clear of those fish. So that's on the section of river directly downstream from a direct manufacturer, DuPont. They later turned into Chemours. They discharged this stuff for 40 years, and that was the consumption advisory that was issued there for a threshold for one particular type of PFAS called PFAS. It's a legacy compound. But there are other dischargers. Lear, that I just mentioned, is one of them. And so one of our board members, Jessica, I don't think she's here this morning, said, hey, I live on the Northeast Cape Fear downstream of Lear. I flew over this site one time. The whole swamp was white with all this foam. I was like, what in the world is this stuff? I eventually figured out, this was Lear. The next day I went with a PFAS sample kit, sampled high levels of PFAS. Then I met Jessica. She said, yeah, come fish at my property. And so that's what we did. We went out, we caught fish. We processed those fish in the exact same way, using the exact same procedure that the state used. We sent it to the exact same lab that the state used. $500 per sample for these fish. We caught bluegill and largemouth bass because that's what we could catch. But those are the fish that everybody can catch, and those are the fish that people eat. Our fish in these 3 samples had between 8 and 20 times more PFOS, PFOS, than the threshold set by the state for the river that was downstream of Chemours. And so I'm saying this to illustrate the fact that, anytime you have a PFAS discharger into a waterway, the fish downstream of that discharge are going to be contaminated. And if you were to go to Serecta, right where we were fishing here, and you were to stand on the bridge that crosses the Northeast Cape Fear River, and you were to look in either direction, the trees in either direction are filled with bobbers. And those bobbers are there because people fish there, and they get their bobbers stuck in the tree. And if you're fishing with bobbers off a bridge in Duplin County, you're not throwing those fish back, all right? You're taking those fish home and you're eating them. And so we've got a real problem with PFAS that I think sometimes flies under the radar here with fish consumption. We've got a huge problem with PFAS that we all know about in drinking water. Current opportunities. So who went to the Wilmington hearing, the EMC hearing on the PFAS, and I'm putting this in quotes, minimization rules? Awesome. Yeah, we really, I was so proud of Wilmington. We crushed it. Had the largest turnout in the state. There were 6 meetings, incredible comments from folks in this room and others. And the EMC got an earful about how terrible those rules were because they just allow industry to continue to discharge and even increase discharges and simply request that they come up with a plan on how they might one day reduce PFAS emissions with no teeth at all. That comment deadline, so we had the hearing, but the written comment deadline is June 15th. So if you haven't gotten comments in, you still have time. Morgan's got information on the website that'll help you get your comments in, and that's really important. Around the same time as that was happening, the US EPA was gutting PFAS drinking water standards. So this first one was talking about discharge standards. This is talking about drinking water standards. So we had for a brief time the first ever drinking water standards for PFAS. They've now been largely gutted, but that comment period on the gutting of those rules ends July 20th. There's a public hearing July 7th. We'll have information about how you can attend that public hearing. You can sign up to speak at that public hearing, and you can submit written comments to the EPA on why we should have drinking water standards for PFAS. And there is no watershed on planet Earth that has any more important and any more importance and relevance and right to submit comments than the Cape Fear watershed. We've had our water contaminated with PFAS for longer than some of the people in this room have been alive. So we've had huge failures at the state level. We've had huge failures at the federal level. We have one, we are now kind of looking for any opportunity to help protect our water. And this bill is in play in the General Assembly right now, the 2026 Water Safety Act. It rolled over from last round in the General Assembly. This has a number of things in it that could significantly help with PFAS contamination in the river. And the key here is that the bill is there, but we got to get the bill passed. And this is a big deal. And so we're going to have information out like next week on how we can try to influence legislators on this bill to make sure that it gets voted on and gets approved. So stay tuned on that. House Bill 569 and 570, those are both stalled. They both passed the House. One was a bill to say, hey, we have no reason to practice fighting fires with AFFF. We can just practice fighting fires with foam that we get from Dawn soap or something. We don't have to use a dangerous PFAS chemical. And then 569 is polluter liability. So the people that contaminated our drinking water supply, that we had to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to install high-tech solutions at Cape Fear Public Utility Authority and Brunswick County's water treatment plant, they should pay for those, not us as ratepayers. We shouldn't pay for polluters' pollution. These are both stalled in the Senate. I don't know what stalled in the Senateo is, but maybe I think I slipped into Latin there, you know. And this is, honestly, it's possible that those are going to stay stalled in the Senate. But here's the thing. If you talk to your legislator and they're like, what matters to you, then this is an opportunity to say, the bills that passed the House that were going to reduce PFAS exposure in my drinking water that stalled in the Senate, I don't like that. Why keep a good bill down, right? Pass these bills that are going to make an impact. So there's two numbers. You can reference those if you talk to a legislator, especially someone in the Senate, and let them know. A couple of things on the bottom. Chemours is still trying to expand. They're expanding in a couple of ways. They're expanding the number of wells that they're still finding contamination in. That's one way they're expanding. And while they're still doing that, while they're still trying to figure out just how far their contamination plume goes in 10 counties in North Carolina, they're asking the state to allow them to increase production there, which is just insane, and I think a real slap in the face to folks that are, dealing with their contamination for the last half a century. So stay tuned. The permit that will really control this is an air permit. And when that air permit, if that air permit comes out, there will be an opportunity for the public to weigh in on that. And that will be really important. Regulators need to hear from affected communities on that permit in particular. Their water permit is also up for renewal. That renews every 5 years. This isn't for an expansion, this is just to continue. And so for things like those ultra short chain PFAS, they need to be adding those ultra short chain PFAS to the list of things they remove before discharging into the Cape Fear River. When that permit comes up, that will be a really critical time for folks to get involved. And then finally, Lear, the company upstream of where we caught those fish, also has their draft NPDES permit in. It's been delayed. The state has a lot of questions about it. The state has a lot of questions about it because we've asked a lot of questions about it, and our members have asked a lot of questions about it. But if that permit were to come up for comment, we need people to comment on that permit. We need people to explain that we don't need any more PFAS in fish. 1,4-dioxane, this is in a lot of ways, similar to PFAS. So I'm not going to go into nearly as much detail, but it's widespread in the watershed. It's dangerous. It's a probable carcinogen. It's underregulated, and it's in our drinking water. In fact, it's in our drinking water quite a bit. If you look at CFPUA's testing results, they test for PFAS, they test for 1,4-dioxane. 1,4-dioxane exceeded the EPA recommended level 140 days of the year on average. That's a lot. And the main source of 1,4-dioxane at this point in the Cape Fear River is the town of Asheboro's wastewater treatment plant. And it's not because people in Asheboro poop and pee a lot of 1,4-dioxane. It's because Asheboro, the wastewater treatment plant in Asheboro, takes industrial waste from a big company called Starpet, which makes plastic, and they use 1,4-dioxane, and then they send their industrial waste to a human wastewater treatment plant. And Asheboro, because they get paid to take that waste from that industry, and they want to continue to get paid, they don't require that industry to pre-treat that waste to remove things like 1,4-dioxane. And so it just goes right through the system, because a system that's designed to treat poop and pee doesn't treat 1,4-dioxane, okay? We've got to do a better job of treating industrial waste one way and human waste another way and agricultural waste another way that actually addresses the problems. So we sued Asheboro. Haw River Assembly and Cape Fear River Watch sued Asheboro to stop this pollution. And that lawsuit is in court now. They are trying to get that lawsuit dismissed. I don't think that's going to work. I think we have every right to sue a company that's discharging a carcinogen into our water that's there 140 days a year. The EMC proposed, I was talking, that hearing we had in Wilmington was for PFAS, but there was another set of hearings that mirrored that set of hearings for 1,4-dioxane. And a lot of us kind of structured our comments so that we were kind of counting both of those, because we have them both here. They just didn't have a 1,4-dioxane here. So you can submit comments to the EMC for 1,4-dioxane just like you can submit them for PFAS. You can do both, in fact. You just have to reference both of them. And we are still in court, and we'll be in court until we are either forced out of court or until we win. And I think we have a good chance of winning here. But again, we're in court representing you. We're Cape Fear River Watch. You are our members. We represent our members when we go to court to try to stop pollution. And so another reason why you are very important for the work we're doing here to clean up water. Moving on to factory farms. I don't know why this thing is here. I wish I could get that to disappear. But 150 factory farms. Those red circles, each one of them is a factory farm. Some of them are swine farms, like this one here with a lagoon, or this one here with a lagoon. Some of them are poultry farms, like this one right here, right next to the swine farm. This is another big poultry. There's a poultry. There's a swine. I highlighted the waterways here in Duplin County just so you can kind of see how they're situated. Like, it's like they're always on the headwaters of these streams, right? It's like there's no way in the world that it could rain and not have the stuff on these fields run off into these streams. It's almost like they built them like that. So, I mean, 150 factory farms. Each one of these barns, so it looks like there's maybe 10 poultry barns there. I mean, sometimes there's 12, 16, 18. Just across the border in the lumber basin, there are farms that have like 48. Each one of those barns holds about 35,000 chickens. 5 crops a year rotate through there, so 35,000 times 5 times 14 or 16 or whatever it is, that is a huge amount of poultry waste. And it's the same with swine waste. I showed you those lagoons early on. It's just enormous amounts of waste. And the best way that I've found to illustrate how much waste it is a quick little thing I'm going to walk you through so that you can just visualize waste. How many people in North Carolina? About 10 million. Yeah, 10 million and growing. I'm just going to talk about pigs because we don't have all day. Roughly how many pigs in North Carolina? It's about 10. It's actually more like, it's actually shrinking a little bit in North Carolina. We're actually seeing a slight reduction in pigs. So it's more like 9. But I'm going to say 10 because I can do multiples of 10 in my head. So 10 million people and 10 million swine, just for illustrative purposes here. Now imagine that the 10 million people in North Carolina that are in Charlotte and High Point, Durham, Raleigh, like the mountains, all the places west of I-95. Imagine that we magically took all those people and crammed them into the eastern part of the state. Now you've got 10 million people. All the people in North Carolina are east of I-95. So think about that. You think traffic's bad now? 10 million people east of I-95. Now imagine that we had a very detailed feeding regimen for all those people because we wanted those people to get really big really fast because we were going to send them to a plant in Tar Heel, North Carolina. Those people were going to create a lot more waste now because of this feeding regimen. In fact, they were going to create like 6 to 10 times more waste than they normally would have. So you've got 10 million people, but you got to really multiply that between 6 and 10. I'm going to do 10. It's on the high end. I know I'm not being inflammatory. It's just a multiple thing I can do. That's 100 million people's worth of waste east of I-95. Think about that. That's just swine. That's a little bit of an overestimate. 100 million people's worth of waste. Now, how do we treat it? We don't send it to a wastewater treatment plant like we do with people? We spray it on the ground. We put it into a big open cesspool, and then we put a giant pump in it, and then we spray it onto the ground. Imagine if we put 100 million people east of I-95, and then when we flushed our toilets, it all went on the ground, on the field around us. It's gross. That's the situation we've got with swine. And now we've got even more poultry. Poultry is exploding in North Carolina because there's no permit required for poultry. We at least have a permit required for swine. This is Sampson County. Remember the headwaters of the Black River? Every pink dot is a swine farm. Every yellow dot is a hog, or every yellow dot is a poultry farm. This is Duplin County. Remember the headwaters of the Northeast Cape Fear. The Northeast Cape Fear and the Cape Fear meet, and the black comes in just above. So, you know, they're meeting here. All of this waste is meeting here. It's just a huge problem. If you go to listen to a presentation from Dr. Mike Mallon at UNCW, who's been measuring water quality in the Cape Fear River for 30 years on a monthly basis, and you look at things like nutrients and bacteria and algal indicators, they're all on a steady straight line up, and they all have been because of this system. The system, there's no other state in there's no other state in the country that does animal agriculture as poorly as we do it in North Carolina, especially for poultry, because we don't have a permit. These animals live in these big concrete barns, metal roofs. They never go outside. Every single aspect of their life is carefully managed, from the feed to the waste. The integrators, the companies that buy these things, that slaughter these things, places like Smithfield, Sanderson Farms, Purdue, Prestige, Butterball. They own the animals, they own the feed, they leave the farmers with the waste and the barns, which carry the most liability. This is a very corporate-heavy food system. There are other things in the feed besides just food, subtherapeutic antibiotics to keep animals in that close kind of confinement from getting sick, because if one animal gets sick, they all get sick very quickly. A lot of pharmaceutical use, a lot of things like copper in feed. We have a copper problem in the Cape Fear River. It's not because of bottom paints on boats, it's because of hog feed. We're impaired for copper in the lower Cape Fear River. And the waste is very similar in its content. It's a little bit different in the way it's managed. Swine waste is liquid, so it has to stay fairly close to the farm. It gets sprayed out on fields. Poultry waste is more of a dry litter. It can get moved around in trucks. And so you'll see, as I fly around Duplin and Sampson County, I look down the ground and you just see these big piles of litter. This year, just this year, I've reported 50 violations of litter management rules to DEQ. So that means I have to get in a plane, I have to fly once, I have to see a pile of litter, I have to document that pile of litter with photographs in a field journal. I have to then fly again 15 days later to confirm that that pile stayed uncovered in the field for more than 15 days, which is a violation of the rule. I then have to send that to DEQ with those photographs, before and after photographs. And I have to do that all in one flight on those two very large counties. I am only seeing a tiny, tiny fraction of the ground on that flight. And so if I'm reporting 50 violations this year so far, there are many, many, many times more than 50 violations occurring in that industry. And that waste is running off into waterways, and that is leading to all kinds of problems, including algal blooms, harmful algal blooms that create toxins in water, fish kills, and just the loss of enjoyment when we recreate on waterways. When you go out to paddle in an area and it's covered in algae, or it stinks, or you see a fish kill, that is a loss to you. And the reason it's a loss to you is because industry has shifted that burden to you. Instead of them managing their waste, you're managing with the fallout of that waste. And that's wrong. This is what it looks like from the air. This is how close these facilities are to waterways a lot of times. Right? So there's 2 lagoons, and this is a big waterway. That's probably Little Kohari Creek or Great Kohari Creek. This is what happens. This is a pivot sprayer here, spraying waste out of this lagoon. These are hogs. The waste goes in here, then it goes over to here, then it gets sprayed on the ground. These are hose reel sprayers here. You can see how wet the fields are. You can see this ditch running down here, and you can see this runoff from these fields. These are like headwater streams now, but they're just pure pig waste. And this facility got a notice of violation because we reported it, and then we followed up a bunch, and you know, they were violating the permit, and they got a notice of violation. But it was only because we complained. It was only because we got in a plane and saw this. They get inspected once a year. Minimal regulation of this industry. And you see this kind of thing all the time. Poultry waste, very similar story, big piles of waste. That's what it looks like from the air. And this is what happens. I mean, that's what's going on every day right now. We go out there, we'll see piles of litter, we'll see, you know, hog waste run off. When a hurricane hits in eastern North Carolina, everything goes off the rails, right? So entire lagoons rupturing, entire facilities underwater, including the lagoons. You know, this is Chinquapin. This is the you know, waste in these barns. They lock the doors when hurricanes come because they don't want the animals visible when they die. They lock the doors to keep the dead animals inside because during Hurricane Floyd, when there were hundreds and thousands of pigs floating in the water and people took pictures of them, things happened. And so now they just drown the animals in the barns, and whatever runs out, runs out. It runs through this community, through these houses and schools and churches and nursing homes and whatever else is there. They keep spraying before and after storms and during storms because they know that if they don't, those lagoons will rupture. And all that waste goes into waterways and floodwaters. We're building right now poultry CAFOs in the floodplain. We rebuilt poultry CAFOs after Hurricane Matthew that flooded again in Hurricane Florence, and now we've rebuilt them again. And they will flood again. And this is the latest and greatest in the land of swine CAFOs. This is a biogas lagoon. This is a lagoon that was covered. They're capturing methane. There's another lagoon, not visible in this picture. It doesn't get rid of the lagoon and spray field system. It just adds another lagoon and more capacity and runs pipelines through the communities that are dealing with, you know, landfills and wood pellets and poultry and swine CAFOs and all the other things. We've now added pipelines to the mix. And there's really almost no evidence that we're actually reducing methane emissions from these facilities. So, but what this does do is it entrenches this industry. So I mentioned that North Carolina does it worse than everybody. We have the worst regulations on swine and no regulations on poultry. But when we do something like biogas and we spend a lot of money putting these digesters in, all that does is keep these systems around a little bit longer. It keeps them limping along to degrade water quality in the Cape Fear Basin even longer. I don't have time to go into slaughterhouses because that's a part of this story too. Yeah, who wants me to go into slaughterhouses? These are 18-wheelers down here, these little rectangle things. This is where the pigs come in. These are all the trucks waiting. It's 30,000 hogs a day that go into here. They go through this entire system. Their discharge is here. The Cape Fear River is here. The EPA hasn't implemented new effluent limitation guidelines for slaughterhouses in 20 years. They're supposed to do it every 5 years. We sued the EPA over this, and that lawsuit is ongoing after many attempts by the EPA to block it and to totally disrupt the process. We are still continuing to move forward on that, and hopefully we'll at least, at a minimum, get new effluent limitation guidelines for slaughterhouses. This is the largest swine slaughterhouse in the world on the Cape Fear River. The largest poultry slaughterhouse in the country is like 6 miles from this one. It's Mount Ayr. It's not in the Cape Fear Basin. It's just over the line into the lumber basin. But the Butterball facility in Duplin County near Calypso is massive. And I've been flying over that a lot. And it's heartbreaking. Current factory farm advocacy. I talked about current things you can do for PFAS. Now we're on to factory farms. The 5-year renewal cycle for the general permit for swine and biogas. Those are parallel permits. They renew roughly every 5 years when they work right. That process is starting now. We're involved in that process. We've been at stakeholder meetings. The process is quite a bit different this year because of a lawsuit filed by the Farm Bureau during the last cycle, which brought the EMC, the same body that's responsible for these terrible PFAS rules and for a lot of other pretty bad things. I'll mention more of them. They have now gained more control over this permit system. They've also gained members who are appointed by the Agriculture Commissioner, Steve Troxler. And so we are certain that these rules are going to get worse instead of better. There are opportunities, there will be opportunities, not yet, but there will be soon, to both comment on that process of giving the EMC more control over this, over the swine permits and also the permits themselves. And so when you see things come out in the newsletter from Morgan that say, hey, we need you to weigh in on whether or not the EMC, which is made up of members appointed by Steve Troxler, who is the biggest hog farm booster in the world, whether they should be writing permits or not, then you can weigh in. And when you say, hey, there's going to be a permit out for biodigesters and we need to do more to clean up that waste, you can weigh in on that. So stay tuned for those. We're already involved as a stakeholder in this process, and we'll keep you informed. On to the Wilmington Harbor expansion. Has anybody seen me present this part yet? Okay, good. This is one of my favorite parts. Everybody who knows who Magellan was, right? Did anybody else's friends, whenever you would get lost, they would be like, "Nice work, Magellan." This is a replica of Magellan's flagship, the Neo Trinidad. It came to Wilmington. This is down at the Cape Fear Marina, and you could go tour it and everything. I took my kids. We went walking around. It took us probably 4 minutes to walk stem to stern. So it came to Wilmington. So I was out in the patrol boat, and I was on the river, and I look up, and here comes this guy, and I'm like, this is not normal. And I thought, well, I'm going to get a quick little picture of it. Oh, I hope this works. So I'm like, oh, neat, look at the little replica ship coming in. And then I'm like, wow, what's happening down here? Oh, my God. This is how we've changed right here. This is how far shipping has come. So keep in mind, Magellan's ship here is in the foreground. It's like when you hold the fish out next to the camera. It looks a lot bigger than it actually is. This is a post-Panamax 3 cargo container that's leaving the Port of Wilmington. That means it's already come into the Port of Wilmington and turned around and left. And that's what we're looking at there. I saw the guy on the Magellan ship. He was like, no, he wasn't really doing that. All right, so you all know the port. It's like right down here. It's huge. I showed you a picture of it. The river has changed dramatically over the last 300-400 years. When European explorers got here for the first time, the river was about 12 feet deep at Campbell Island. Campbell Island is like the delta where Town Creek flows into the river, and it deposited all that sediment. It made an island. The river was super shallow there. You used to be able to go out and find ballast stones on Campbell Island because the ships would sail into the river. We're the only river that connects to the ocean, so we were really important. They would sail in, but they would get to that sandbar at Campbell Island. They'd have to dump a bunch of ballast stones before they made it all the way up to Wilmington. Since then, we've been dredging deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. You kind of have this is a slide Roger's shoe made. So you can kind of see over the years how we've gone. So we're at 44 feet now from 12 feet. And we want to go even deeper. Not we. the port wants to go even deeper because they want to get those post-Panamax 3 ships, those ships that were built to fit into the newly enlarged Panama Canal. So you can't build a ship any larger than the waterway that it has to go through, but you can build it just as big as that waterway. And so the port wants to expand. They've been pushing this project, and the Corps did a draft environmental impact statement, which they have to do for any large-scale project like this that uses federal funds. They said the project's going to cost $1.3 billion to deepen the harbor from the port out into the ocean, about 7 miles into the ocean, because even the ocean isn't deep enough for these ships when it's near shore. You actually have to dredge out into the ocean 7 miles. It costs about $14.4 million every year to do maintenance dredging, so $100 million in the first 7 years. And the Corps acknowledged in the draft EIS, which was surprising to me, that the project isn't actually going to increase the amount of containers that come and go from the Port of Wilmington. It's just going to change the way those containers come and go. They're going to come more containers on fewer ships. And what does that mean? It means efficiency for shipping companies. What does that mean for shipping companies? Cost savings. So we're going to spend, according to the draft environmental impact statement, $1.3 billion deepening the harbor. This is a project that would have enormous environmental impact. Enormous. We would destroy primary nursery habitat. We would, overwash bird islands. We would have huge erosion impacts. We would puncture the aquifer. We would blast limestone off the bottom. We would increase saltwater intrusion. We would increase tidal amplitude. We would increase sunny day flooding. We would increase hurricane impacts. We would spend our money to do this, and then the only people that benefit are shipping companies, which see the benefit through efficiencies in their process. That doesn't sound like a good deal to me, but that's kind of what the port has proposed. So in that picture I just showed you, you remember the ship? Remember what kind of ship it was? It was a post-Panamax 3 ship. It's already, those ships are already here, right? They're just not quite fully loaded. This is where we stand on the rankings of ports in the U.S. Our closest competitors, Charleston, is 8 times bigger than us. Norfolk is 11 times bigger, and Savannah is 17 times bigger. Here we are down here. Who thinks that a ship is going to sail across the Atlantic Ocean or through the Panama Canal, and the first place they're going to come is to a small port in the middle between a bunch of big ports? No. Not likely. We already have those ships here. The damage, the cost, the damage are immense. This is a project that doesn't make any sense for anybody other than the Port of Wilmington and shipping companies. And the state thinks the same thing. So there was a consistency review project, consistency review process where the state looks at the draft environmental impact statement that the Corps produces, and they compare that to the state's coastal management plan. And that coastal management plan is what we've agreed, the way we want to manage our coastal resources. And so the state said, down here, you can kind of read it, the federal study of the plan is too scant on details, and that the deepening and widening channel would have significant adverse impacts to coastal resources. One of the big things that they really are worried about is the fact that the Corps of Engineers, despite the fact that 3.5 years ago in a stakeholder meeting, a bunch of environmentalists and a bunch of agency folks were all in a room with the Corps where the Corps was saying, we really want to hear your feedback on this project, and we really want to take that into account. And we all said, okay, here's a lot of information that we have that you're not looking at. We're wondering what you think about PFAS, and we think you ought to do a lot of sampling of PFAS in the sediment because we know that there's been PFAS discharge into this river for 50 years. The Corps did no new data collection, and they basically ignored us when we said we're worried about PFAS in sediment because when you dredge sediment, you've got to do something with it. The EIS proposes that they put it onto beaches, they put it onto bird islands, and they put it onto marsh and thin layers on the marsh to allow the marsh to grow up through it. And this was one of the big complaints by the state, is that, hey, you guys haven't even really sampled for PFAS in the sediment that you're getting ready to dredge and put on the beaches. And so that's where we are now. The state has opposed the plan, and the Corps is now probably frantically trying to respond to that. The Corps can, if they chose to, steamroll the state's objections. They could just roll right over them. That's kind of unlikely. What was really unlikely, actually, was that the state, this was a big deal for the state to come out and say this. And so I think it would be a pretty big deal for the federal government to ignore it altogether. And here's the thing, the cost-benefit ratio for this project is 1 to 1.3. So it's really small. Most Corps projects are like in the 1 to 4 or 1 to 8 range. This is 1 to 1.3. So there's very little benefit above the cost. And if you were to say, you know what, we're going to sample PFAS in the river, and if you were to find PFAS in that sediment, which I think I can say pretty confidently that you're going to find PFAS in sediment in the river if PFAS was discharged in the river for 50 years. And if you were to say, you know what, it's probably not a good idea to dump PFAS-laden sediment onto beaches and bird islands, and we're going to have to spend now much more money removing that sediment, and I know this doesn't sound like a better option, but sending it out into the ocean to dump it instead of dumping it on nearby beaches, that's going to quickly erode that 0.3 benefit. And once you get beyond a 1 to 1 ratio, once the cost exceeds the benefits, that's a dead project from a federal perspective, right? Because that means taxpayers are paying more than anybody gains. And so that's where I think where we may be here, is that any change to this plan to accommodate the state's objections, which include PFAS and other things, will start to push this project into the red. And so we'll stay tuned for that. We don't know what the Corps' response is yet. They have still said that they're hoping to get the EIS updated and released by summertime. I don't really see how that could happen, but that's kind of what they're hoping to do. But that is where we are. There is one additional opportunity for advocacy here on this. This is I don't want to confuse these two issues because they're different. This was just released. This is a public comment period for the way dredging is done in Wilmington Harbor, also the way dredging is done in Charleston and Savannah. And the reason this is being done is because 4 years ago we sued the Corps of Engineers because they said, we've been having these windows for, Jesus, late. I'm almost done. We had these windows to protect endangered species, so we can't dredge when endangered species are near the dredges. So that's sturgeon, that's sea turtles, and they proposed to just eliminate those windows kind of arbitrarily. And we were like, that doesn't make any sense. You've been doing this for decades now. So we sued and we won, and they had to put those windows back in place. And this is finally the EIS that they're coming up with to kind of reinstate official rules around this. And so this public comment deadline is June 29th. That's not all that far away. We'll be submitting very detailed technical comments on this. There's an in-person meeting at Alderman Elementary School near the Flytrap Garden. You probably know where that is. And then there's virtual public meetings as well. So we'll have information out on these things on the website. You'll have an opportunity to comment on any of the stuff you just heard from me. You can also read this big, long document that I just copied the top of. But this maintenance dredging is an important part of this project too, right? Because this deals with the maintenance dredging. The maintenance dredging is a cost that they have to consider. And so they're going to be looking for every opportunity to reduce those costs by doing things like dredging when there are endangered species in the river. And we're going to be doing everything possible to make sure that they consider how important things like endangered species are for dredging. Okay, last big thing, I'm going to go fast. Interbasin transfer. Transferring water from one water basin, one watershed, to another watershed. And you might say, well, why would you do that? There'd be no reason to do it just to do it. It's all about water use and wastewater discharge. That's how the interbasin transfer happens, which I think is it's not intuitive really, I don't think so. I'll try to explain it. So this is the Sanford drinking water intake. They want to take water out of this intake. They want to send it to Fuquay-Varina, right there on I-40 before you get to Raleigh. They want to use it in Fuquay-Varina, a rapidly growing part of the state. Then they want to send it when the water goes down the drain. They want to send it to a wastewater treatment plant that discharges into the Neuse River Basin. So they're going to pull drinking water from the Cape Fear, then you're going to use it, then it's going to go to a wastewater treatment plant that discharges into the Neuse River Basin. Instead of just running the wastewater treatment pipe back to the Cape Fear, because they want to save money, right? It's always about the money. And what that's going to do is permanently remove that water from the Cape Fear and permanently put it into the Neuse Basin. And that, from an ecological perspective, that's a really bad idea. This is a 6 million gallon a day proposal, but 6 million gallons a day is just the beginning, because they've already built the infrastructure and they hope to do 20 million gallons a day. So 20 million gallons a day, that's February. April. This is extreme drought and severe drought. Like, there's nothing on this map that says normal except for nothing. So any color is bad, but definitely these two colors are bad. And even with recent rains, we're still in severe drought and moving back up into extreme drought. This is last week. So we used to have a guy that was our executive director named Frank Yelverton, and Frank Yelverton worked for the Corps of Engineers for like 35 years. He was a project manager. He oversaw the construction of the fish passage at Lock and Dam number 1. He oversaw a big mitigation project for dredging down here. He knew this river really well, and he understood a lot about it, and he was a great guy to have around because he had such a great perspective, because he had spent like 35 years at the Corps, and he had worked for the state before that. In 2012, we had a drought. It was a little worse than this drought. He said, Kemp, I'm going to tell you, I was out at Lock and Dam number 1. I was working for the Corps. I was at the dam. I was standing on the lock chamber, and I'm looking across the river, across the top of the dam. I'm standing right next to it, looking across the river. I could see all the way across the dam, and there were seagulls walking the length of the dam, and they were walking around, and they were waiting for tiny fish to swim over the dam, and then they were reaching down and picking them up, because there was only about that much water flowing over the dam, and so the seagulls could just continue to walk across the dam and pick those little fish up as they went. We had another big drought in 2007. Take 20 million gallons of water away from that every day, and how much water do you think is flowing over that dam? And this was back in 2012. So we're now, however many years that is till now, 14 years? And think about how much growth we've experienced in this area. Think about Brunswick County. Think about New Hanover County. Think about how much more water we're using as people, how much more water we're pulling out of the river already. And then think about whether or not it's a good idea to let other communities upstream pull water out of our source water, and dump it into another source water. And keep in mind, we don't have time to go into a lot of detail here, but we know what's in our water, right? Do you think the Neuse River Basin wants to pull a lot of Cape Fear River water and dump it in there? A lot of PFAS, a lot of 1,4-dioxane, a lot of hog waste, a lot of chicken waste? Probably not. This is an attempt by Fuquay-Varina to save money, because they don't want to run a wastewater treatment line and put good wastewater treatment technology at their wastewater treatment plant in Fuquay and dump it back into the Cape Fear River. It's a simple solution. They just have to pay the money instead of taking it from us. Comment period closed on April 1st, which is April Fool's Day, which is appropriate because EMC Chair Solomon personally blocked efforts to have a public hearing down here in Wilmington. We're the #1 user of that water, and he personally blocked efforts of Lower Cape Fear residents, including Cape Fear Public Utility Authority and Brunswick County, for having a hearing down here. There will be additional public hearings as this process moves forward. If it moves forward, there's been universal opposition by downstream users. Every community, municipality, water treatment agency, whether it was a county or a public utility authority, submitted comments in opposition of this plan. We'll see where it goes from there. Stay tuned for public hearing opportunities. What else could there be? No hard proposals yet in the Cape Fear Basin, but I'm sure you guys have heard of data centers. I'm sure you've heard about how much electricity they use, how much water they use, the wide variety of systems that are in place, some terrible, some less terrible. Sledge forest and other development. Who's heard of some really bad ideas on development in this area? How about Point Peter down there? That was my personal favorite.
Yeah.
Martin Marietta mine expansion. So we beat Titan Cement. That fight started in 2008. We beat them in 2016. Martin Marietta is now proposing to expand that limestone mine. There's a public comment period coming for that. We'll post details on it. State and federal attacks. We've seen plenty of those. There's a lot to deal with. There's a lot to fight here. And that's because every single environmental issue that you hear all over the world that you think, man, those guys got it really bad over there, they're really struggling with this thing, you can bet that it's happening here too. You can bet that if you're talking about climate change and sea level rise, New Hanover County is going to feel it. We're a tiny wedge of land between the Cape Fear River and the Atlantic Ocean. When it happens, we're probably going to be one of the first people to see it. Toxic pollution, PFAS, 1,4-dioxane, waste management, industrial waste, Chemours. Human waste, wastewater treatment plants that take industrial waste or not. Agricultural waste from CAFOs, and stormwater from any urban area around. Energy, coal ash we talked about, offshore energy, offshore gas, offshore wind, fracking. They're actually talking about now, I've heard a proposal up in Lee County to frack for natural gas to run a data center. Wood pellets. I didn't even talk about wood pellets. That's going on in, there's a wood pellet plant in Sampson County and a storage facility here at the port. They're cutting down southern forests to send wood pellets to Europe under this guise of sustainable energy. It's not, that's the short story. And then all kinds of renewable energy projects. These are not necessarily good or bad things. They're just things that are out there. Water quality and quantity, reservoirs, data centers, habitat loss for all the many endangered and threatened species we have in the Cape Fear. Industrial agriculture, I talked about that. Transportation, trade, port expansion, roads, bridges, damming and altering rivers, fishery restoration. I talked about the fish passage. That I've even heard the idea that the idea of a new reservoir in the lower Cape Fear is still, despite what we know about how problematic dams are for rivers, despite that, people are still every once in a while floating the idea of another new reservoir in the lower Cape Fear. Closing thoughts. What happens upstream affects everything downstream. The other thing I like to say when I say this is Naima Muhammad, who is a big environmental justice leader in North Carolina, used to say, water always runs downhill unless it runs uphill towards money. And I always thought that was pretty spot on. Economic development and environmental protection are not mutually exclusive. They are mutually dependent. Have you ever said to yourself, I want to go to the place where they've destroyed their environment and hang out or build my house or take my family or start a business or anything? You don't want to go there. You stay away from those places. You want to go to the places that have done the best job of protecting their environment. Industries that don't accurately account for waste management, that do things like dump PFAS into the Cape Fear River instead of treating it before it goes in there, that dump agricultural waste in the Cape Fear River, all that means is that you and I pay to treat that waste instead of them paying to treat that waste, and they make a lot more profits and we lose a lot more money. And we lose it in a few ways. We lose it because we have to treat it at our drinking water source, so we're paying higher water bills right now. If you drink water in New Hanover County, you're paying high water bills, and you're about to spend a lot more money in Brunswick County. And we pay for it with higher health costs, and we pay for it with lower property values, and we pay for it with loss of value and enjoyment of our waterways because it's got pollution in it. So we pay for it 3 or 4 times, and they get to not pay for it at all, and that's wrong. We need to shift to the precautionary principle of risk management, right? So that means if we're thinking about doing something that we don't really understand, we should spend a lot of time really understanding what the long-term impacts of that be 40 years down the road, like PFAS, before we unleash a new source of pollution into a waterway or into the air. Laws without enforcement are meaningless. So if I report 50 violations of poultry management rules to the state and they issue one notice of violation, what do you think that tells poultry farmers in the Cape Fear Basin? Environmental injustice is real and it's wrong, and nobody should be more at risk of cancer or emphysema or asthma than anybody else just because of how much money they make or what the color of their skin or where they live. And this, if you go to Sampson County, you can't be in a place that's not impacted by environmental injustice. I mean, it happens everywhere, but if you want to see some of the worst examples in the entire country, go to Sampson County and stand next to that landfill or next to a hog farm or next to a poultry farm or next to the Enviva plant. Undue corporate influence in politics is bad for the environment and public health. If the EMC, the Environmental Management Commission, is passing PFAS and 1,4-dioxane minimization rules that they were handed by an industry lobbyist, verbatim, and this is in emails, you can read this, it's in the public record. If they take those rules that were given to them by industry and then they put them up to regulate those pollutants, that's wrong. They are not representing industry. They are supposed to be representing the people of North Carolina. The more local the government, the more local you are to the government, the more accountable that government is to you, right? And so it may seem like things happening at EPA are really hard to change, and they can be hard to change, but local decisions matter, and so don't forget that part of advocacy. State is a little bit easier than federal, and local is a little bit easier than state. And finally, most importantly, together we can make a difference. And the reason we know that we can make a difference is that together we already have made a difference. And we've seen it over and over, and it's easy to forget that. It's easy to forget that we beat Titan Cement after an 8-year-long fight. It's easy to forget that we took on the largest energy producer in the country, Duke Energy, and we forced them to clean up every single coal ash pond in the state of North Carolina. It's easy to forget that we used some of the settlement funds from that settlement with Duke Energy to purchase the land to help. We didn't purchase it, we helped the Nature Conservancy purchase the land where the oldest cypress tree in the country is located. And we could go on and on and on about these things that we kind of forget about because, you know, there's always a new fight, and there's always going to be a new fight. But we can win, and we can make a difference, and we have to keep going. I think we have to work even harder right now than we have worked in the past, and we're doing that. But we absolutely can make a difference. Voices matter. People matter. It sometimes seems like it doesn't. I swear it does. And we sure as hell can't stop now. If you want to join or renew, you can do that. You can do it on the website. This is the end, I swear. That's the mouth of the Cape Fear River. Read that. I give a lot of presentations. I don't give them for myself. I give them to try to make an impact. And so if you saw something here that you thought, well, he could have said that differently. He could have talked about this, or he went too far there. Let me know because it's going to let me do my job better. Thanks, y'all.